All right, we are live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Adobe CC Design Live. My name is Terry White. It's my pleasure to be streaming to you live today once again. Hey, Thomas. Hey, Victoria. Hey, Shah. Hello, everyone that's here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to get started in just a second. Also, welcome to my folks joining on Twitter as well. Crimson Jones, everyone else I see there popping in. Welcome, everybody. So what's today's topic? What are we going to do today? We're going to talk about Photoshop, one of my favorite topics, and we're going to talk about something different, not what I usually talk about. We're not going to talk about Photoshop for photographers. We're going to talk about Photoshop for graphic designers because there's several graphic design features in Photoshop, or just features that go across the board no matter what you're doing, whether it's photography, graphic design, medical, or whatever else you might use Photoshop for, architecture, so forth and so on. Hey, Paulo, how's it going? So with that said, Dana Pride, how's it going over there on Twitter? Welcome, everyone. Let's go ahead and jump right in. We'll keep this as short as we can. Every time I say that, it always goes long, but we'll see what we can do. All right, so 5 features for Photoshop for graphic designers, Photoshop CC. All right, so I've got Photoshop open. I'm just going to go ahead and open up a recent document. I've got this document open here. Now, of course, I'm going to talk about more than 5 things, but I have 5 main things, and of course, we'll gain a couple along the way. One of the ones that we're going to gain along the way, kind of a bonus feature, is actually what's being used inside of this Photoshop file. So you see that this Photoshop file obviously has layers. It has layer groups. It has things that you can turn on and off, and that's great. And this is basically coming all together as one poster, a graphic design type feature. But one of the things that was also implemented in this particular poster was the ability to place content from other Photoshop files or other images. So you can always place in Photoshop, or you have been able to for years and years and years. I just want to point out that you now have 2 choices for the kind of placing that you do. If you do a place embedded, that's the way Photoshop has always worked. If you do a place linked, that is the more modern, newer way. So what that means is you still have a choice, because sometimes you're going to just want it embedded. Sometimes you're going to want it linked. It just depends on what you're doing. When I place something embedded, that says, basically I'm like copying and pasting that content into Photoshop. So that means that whatever changes I make in this document don't affect the original. It has no tie to the original whatsoever. Also, if I go change the original, it doesn't affect this poster. But if I do a place linked and then I go back and change the original file, my file could potentially get updated as well. At least I'll get a warning or notification that the original has changed, and I have the ability to update it if I choose to. All right, so that's fairly new, not brand new. That's been there for a little while now, but the ability to place linked. Now, with that said, I've got this image down here in the bottom right-hand corner that was placed as a linked file, and you can see it. It's like it comes in like a smart object, and if I double-click on it, that will let me get to the original for this. So this is a whole Photoshop document with layers in and of itself placed in the poster. So whatever changes I make here will update the poster. So for example, you notice I've got a couple of layers turned off. I've got a headline turned off, and I've got another copy of the background turned off. So if I turn that one on, it doesn't change because it's just a copy of the background. But let's talk about this. This particular style of type, you would normally see, like maybe you've all seen magazine covers, and you've seen the name of the magazine in big, bold print. So let me give you an example here. Let's say that we wanted to create a new magazine called Urban. What am I doing here? We're going to grab the type tool. We're just going to click, center it, and we're just going to type the word urban in all caps. We're going to make that much stronger. So I'm going to go to one of my heavier fonts. Oh, by the way, let's say I'm looking for a heavy font. Here's another quick graphic design feature, is that I can just type in the word heavy, and it will show me all my fonts that have a heavy style. So one that I use all the time is Fat Frank heavy, but sometimes I use Ephra heavy. Sometimes I use Avenir heavy. Sometimes it depends on what I'm doing. I'll use Tablet Gothic Wide Oblique. All right, so I have some heavy choices here. Oh, I kind of like that Railway heavy. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that. Now, another thing is that you, of course, as a graphic designer, you're used to working in point sizes. So you could say, oh, I want that to be, 64 point. Oh, that's not quite big enough. Oh, I want it to be bigger. Well, you can drop down the menu, but the menu only goes to 72. You can, of course, type in font sizes higher than 72, so I can do 96. But what if I just want to make it bigger visually? Couple of ways to do that. I can do Command-Shift greater than, if I have my type selected the right way. There we go. Command-Shift greater than. That makes it bigger, and I learned that keyboard shortcut like 10 years ago in InDesign. But Photoshop has another way that's even faster. If you hold down your Command key on the Mac, Control key on Windows, you grab one of the corner handles and start pulling, then hold down the Shift key so you don't stretch it. Then you can just simply make the type bigger. Oh, I clicked out of it. Hang on, let me grab it back again. You can make the type bigger visually. You can just do that. So whether it's the word urban, which by the way, that might look a little bit better if we just add a slight amount of drop shadow on that just so we could see it better. And by the way, another bonus tip, when you're in the drop shadow or most of these style effects, you can, of course, use the angle to, swivel it around, or you just literally pick the shadow up and move it around and put it where you want. So I just want that to be just outside of it, just a hair, so we make that thicker. All right, so now I've got that in place. I'm going to sandwich it in between the background copy and, of course, the background. And so same thing, it's just kind of sandwiched in that same area. So if I turn on the background copy, it goes away because it's now hidden underneath or between those two layers. Hello, is that Letitia from Israel? And hello, Andrea. Hello, how are you? So now, of course, what we want to do is we want to kind of make it look like he was standing in front of that type, but of course the type is in front of the building. So that means he needs to be cut out onto his own layer. When I've shown this file before, I had always used the select focus area because he's in focus. So that is a quick way to select the subject that's in focus. However, we got newer ways. So let me go to my quick select tool. And instead of making a painstaking quick selection of this entire subject, I'm just going to go ahead and go to my select subject. So select subject is your first tip. I know I gave you some bonus tips along the way, but when you do a select subject, especially when you're trying to quickly cut something out, Photoshop 9 times out of 10 can identify the subject pretty quickly. So it didn't identify this guy perfectly, but it got me most of the way there. So for example, I'm still in the quick select tool. I can hold down my Option or Alt key and say, no, don't get that part under his chin. And yeah, I want that part of his jacket or sweater. I want this part of his sweater too. And I don't want that part underneath the back of his hair. All right, so quickly made a couple adjustments. Oh, and I do want that part of his glasses over there on the right-hand side. So we got that in place. Now, the next thing I want to do is cut him out. And the easiest way to do that, the best way to do that is with Select and Mask because he's got hair. So with Select and Mask, I've got this set to go on a red overlay. You can, of course, set this to go on just to see what it would look like, which it actually looks pretty good because it's really just a copy of him on top of himself. So that's much easier to cut out. But let's say I want to do it the right way. I want to get rid of some of this white in his hair. I want to get rid of some of that white on the beard. I want to just basically make sure we cut him out the right way. So what I'm going to do is you automatically end up on the Refine Edge Brush tool. And what you want to do is you want to put the plus sign of that tool on the background that used to be there. In other words, I'm going to put the plus sign where the red is because that's where the background used to be. And then just slightly brush into his hair because it will use that former background as a sample of what it should be removing from his hair. So that, I went a little too far there. There we go. That That does a pretty good job there. All right, so now that I've got that in place, the next thing I want to do is put him on a new layer. So my output is not going to be to a selection down there in the bottom right. My output is going to be, just make sure you guys are seeing the bottom of this. Push that up a little bit. My output's going to be the new layer with layer mask. Now I always add a layer mask just in case I missed something, just in case I made a mistake. The layer mask allows me to quickly go back and fix things that I might have missed that I didn't see right away. All right, so let's go ahead and click OK on that. That will give me my new layer with my new layer mask, turning off the previous layer with the background. And now he is in front of the word urban, but the word urban is still in front of the building. The same thing, I can go back to his original title now that he's standing in front of his name and his name is still on the buildings. So whichever way you want to do it now, you have the ability to, wrong one. You have the ability to work with that. And of course, if I grab that type with my select tool, I can move that type around because it is on its own layer. And I can see just how good of a job that did cutting out on his hair as I move that around and we see it. So pretty cool to be able to do that. If you ever wonder an easier way for doing those magazine titles as a graphic designer, that's one of the easiest ways to do it now. Select subject and then select in mask to cut your subject out to make them in front of the masthead of the magazine. All right, so now I'm going to save that. And when I close it, it will automatically update the original poster. Now, the original poster was cropped and is using an adjustment layer and all that to make it a different color, but that's okay. You updated it, and now that is there. And if I ever need to go back and make any changes to it, I still can because it's still the layered file. So if I say, no, he prefers to have it with the name in it instead, I've got multiple versions, just turning layers on and off. I can, of course, save that again, close it, and now we got that one instead. So whichever one you want, whichever one they want, you got the better choice. All right, next thing we're going to do, we're going to go back into that one more time. And I just want to talk about a panel that is fairly new to Photoshop. This is tip number 2, or feature number 2 for graphic designers that you will find yourself using more and more as you use it. In other words, once you get used to it, you'll use it more and more. It is the Properties panel. So if you were to go up to your window menu and come down to Properties, if you didn't already have it, that will pull it out. And the Properties panel, think of it as, it's like the control panel at the top, which is context sensitive, but it is based on what is selected. So see, for example, this is showing me the options for the tool I have selected. But the Properties panel is showing me the options for the layer I have selected. So I'm on the urban text layer, so it's showing me the properties for that layer, even though that layer is turned off. So it's still showing me the properties. So if I were to turn that layer back on, and I said, oh, you know what? I really wish this were, instead of 200.69 point, I really wish it was 185 points. I can go ahead and do that right there on the spot. If I wish that were tracked a little closer, instead of -40, maybe -50, track it a little tighter, and do that all in the Properties panel. When I switch to a different layer, the Properties panel updates with whatever that layer has on it. So the Properties panel, tip number 2, is a great panel to just always have available for when you want to quickly and easily get in and start adjusting your options for whatever layer it is you have selected. All right, so Dave, Molly, and Freed joined us. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's go ahead and continue on with number 3. Number 3, let me turn off this text, is basically the way Photoshop now works with glyphs and alternate glyphs. And I've shown this a million times, and I always use the same font to do it because it's the best font to demo this feature, because this particular font has so many choices. So for example, let's say we were to click a new layer of type, and instead of, here, we'll just go ahead and type his name out, Jesse, and we'll make it left justified, and we'll change the color a little bit, and we'll just go ahead and pick up maybe some of that skin tone. Ooh, it would help if I were to actually select the type. There we go. We'll go ahead and select that skin tone color a bit. There we go. And let's say that I now want to change that font. So again, I can select this. I can go to my type properties. I can start typing in the font that I want, which is Bickham Script Pro. And why am I choosing the script for this? I don't need a script for this, but I just want to show it off because this particular font has the best examples. So for example, let's go ahead and make that a little bit bigger. We have the scrubby type feature also in the properties panel. So if I just scrub that icon to the right, that'll also help me make my type bigger. Now that I've got this in place, before you used to have to bring up, which is also brand new, you used to have to bring up the Glyphs panel to get to this option. So Photoshop added the Glyphs panel, but they also added it in context as well. So what that means is I don't have to bring the panel up. If I want a different J, if this font has multiple capital J's, all I have to do is highlight the letter I want, and you'll notice that the glyph choices now appear at the bottom right of that selection. So if I were to choose that J, which is a big one, I get that J instead. So let's go ahead and make the type smaller again. And I get the different J. Now, some fonts will have one J. Some fonts will have two J's. Some fonts will have 20 J's. Every font's different. Some will have alternate glyphs. Some won't. It's not based on it's not up to Adobe. It's based on whoever designed the font. So for example, if I select the letter E, look at how many E's I have. It's like playing Jeopardy. How many E's are on the board? You know, there you go. So see how many E's are on the board. I can go ahead and choose any one that I want. I can now design logos and type and cards or layouts that have these unique character sets based on whatever the font has in it that the average person won't get because they're just going to type in the standard font, and that will be it. They'll just leave it alone. They won't ever know to go and look for alternates. And so they're really great for the beginnings of the word and the end of the word. You can use them in the middle as well, but it's just not, you're not going to have as many good examples to use in the middle. So for example, if I select the letter S, oops, sorry about that. Hang on, sorry. I am trying to use a keyboard shortcut to select that letter S, and I forgot what it was. So I could do, there we go, Control Shift right arrow when you're having a hard time, or left arrow when you're having a hard time selecting a single thing. So again, select letter S. Well, I could maybe try that one or this one, but this one wouldn't make any sense because that one's designed to be at the end of the word. This one will work, this one will work, this one will work, that one might work. Depends on what you're trying to do. So let's say I chose that one. Yeah, see, then it starts to break it up, like it's putting extra space in between those two letters that I wouldn't want. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. But if you use them in the beginning and the end of the word, then there you go. Yep, spacing's still on -50 in this case as well. So let's go ahead and fix that. Let's switch this back to 0 because you normally don't kern or track. You don't normally kern or track a script font. Also, never type it in all caps. That is like suicide. All right, so that was tip number 3, glyphs. Tip number 4, I'm just going through here. This one's also kind of cool. Let me turn this off for a second. And let's talk about when you're doing a layout and you need to align things. Of course, you know, if you hit Command R, Control R on Windows, you can pull out guides from the ruler. That's pretty cool to be able to do that. However, you can, instead of having to pull out a bunch of guides one by one, you can go in, hey Patty, you can go in and go under your view menu and you can say new guide layout. This will literally give you a whole layout system based on guides. So for example, I could say that I want, I don't know, 6 columns and 4 rows and no gutter space between them. Just give me the guides themselves. And I can create a bunch of grids or guides any way that I want. I can remove the existing guides by clearing them here. I can center the guides based on the layout. So lots of things that you can do. You can also say, nope, just want columns, not rows, so forth and so on. So very cool to be able to create these on the fly without you having to drag them out and measure them one by one. Great tool for graphic designers. All right, and number 5. Let me go ahead and cancel this for, actually I could use, I'm going to cancel it. I've got this CC library open here, and what I want to do is just start pulling out some of these social media icons. So I'm going to pull this first one out, and of course it's going to just pop on the screen full size. Now you can use, since I haven't locked it in yet, it doesn't show up in the properties panel, but it does still show up over here. So I could say, you know what, instead of the width being 100% and the height being 100%, I want this to be a 1/2 inch in size. So wait, that's measuring percentages. How are you going to do that? In most apps for Adobe, and most measurement boxes for Adobe, you can type in a different measurement than what you're actually using. So even if you got your rulers set up and your document set up for pixels, but you say, oh, this particular thing I want to be in inches. What you would do is do 0.5 IN. So now it knows that that's a 1/2 inch. 0.5 IN, and now I know that I've got that exactly a 1/2 inch in size. So I'll go ahead and pull it out, put it where I want it. Great, so that's exactly a 1/2 inch, no matter what the rest of the document is measured at. That's not the tip though. Hang on, let me pull out a few more. Let's go ahead and grab the Twitter icon as well. So we'll pull that one over, same thing, and now it remembers that I'm doing inches. So it's already saying, oh, that's 6.67 inches. I know what you like now. So 5 inch, 0.5 there, 0.5 there, and of course, we can pick that up. And notice I get smart guides. Very helpful for lining things up without me having to pull out all those ruler guides. All right, so I'll go ahead and lock that one in. We'll do one more. Let's do Behance. And we'll go ahead and pull that one out. Same thing. We'll do the 0.5 and 0.5, and we'll pull that one out as well. This one's going to be kind of cool if it works. Not only do we get the smart guys to line it up, but we also, if we get it close enough, I can do this right. Hang on, let me commit to that one. If I do this right, there we go. It gives me the, when I hit the magic spot, that they're the same distance apart. It shows it to me. So then I know to let go. I know that they're not only lined up evenly, but they're also the exact equal distance apart. Now for the tip. I've got these items here, and if I wanted to save out this whole document at a specific size or whatever, I could size the document first, save it out. I could also use the legacy or older save for web and save it out at a specific size, a specific resolution. But there's newer ways to export your images out. So for example, there's 2 new ways. Under the file menu, you've got export. Quick export is JPEG. And as the name implies, just gives me a quick export wherever I tell it to put it. I'll have a JPEG, and boom, if I go to my desktop now, there's the JPEG that I just told it to export. All right, so that's quick export. No muss, no fuss. Just tell me where you want to save it. Done. Well, what if I wanted a PNG instead of a JPEG? Like, where do I change what quick export does? If I go to my file menu, you'll notice that under file menu for Photoshop, there we go. Under the file menu for Photoshop, you'll notice that export has export preferences. So this is where you go and set, no, for quick exports, I always want to do a PNG or a GIF or a JPEG or SVG. Whatever I want, it will do my quick export, and it'll tell it what color space to use, so forth and so on. So now it's going to use PNG instead of JPEG. When I do a quick export, only thing it's going to do is ask me where, and you can even say, don't even ask me where, just save it where the original is. Can you automatically lock proportions? Let me go back and look. I think there was a lock there in the middle. I just don't remember if I saw if it was active or not. But yes, I think so. But anyway, so quick export is PNG now. Will give me the same choice. Where do you want it? On the desktop. Boom, it's PNG on the desktop. No muss, no fuss. So much faster than the save for web. Now, that's great if you want to save the whole thing. But what if I want to save everything in here as something separate? Meaning I want those 3 icons to be 3 separate files. I want Jesse as a separate file. I want the name, not that one. I want that one as a separate file. Oh, actually not that one either. that one. There we go. I want that as a separate file. I want all of these as separate files. So what I can do is cherry pick which ones I want. So I want that one. Holding down your command or control key, depending on which platform you're on. I want those 3. I want this. And sure, I'll take the background as well. I want all of those. Now, don't go to File and choose Quick Export, because that's just going to export the whole thing. There is also an Export As. Don't go there either, because that's just going to export the whole thing. Now, I'm glad you like that, Andrew. Now we're going to go instead, just right-click on one of the layers and choose Export As. Now you're saying, well, what's the difference? Why can't I go to the file and do it? Because this one's smarter. This one says, oh, you selected a bunch of layers. You must want to export those layers separately. And it gives me each one to be able to export out, so I can export out all of them, or I can pick and choose what I want for each one. So I can go in and set the settings for each one. And not only can I set the settings for each one, but I can even say that I want multiple sizes of those export. Right now it's going to export them all out at 100% of their size. Maybe I need one that's also smaller at a half the size. So now I'm going to get all of those layers saved out twice at the 2 different sizes. So all I have to do is just simply say export all. It's going to ask me where. I'm going to grab my export folder here, which is empty, and just say open that. Boom. It's doing it. They're done. That's it. So now if I were to go to the operating system, desktop, and export, there they all are. So background, and background at half the size. Behance at half the size. Facebook at half the size. Jesse at half the size. Jesse Boykins, half the size. So it's giving me each one twice, exactly the way I want. Does that offer Tiff Exports? No, it doesn't, because in most cases, Tiff Exports are a very specific use case. Most people are not using Tiff for this type of work. Because usually if you're exporting out all the pieces, that means you're going to assemble it in something like an app or web design or something like that, and you wouldn't be using Tiff to do it. That's why. So Tiff, you still do the same way you always did. All right, so with that said, those are your five tips for graphic designers. So let's recap. Properties panel, alternate glyphs right on the canvas as you're typing. Select subject and select and mask, and the new guide layout, or newer guide layout, as well as quick export and export as. So 5 tips for graphic designers using Photoshop. I hope that you guys got something out of this. I hope that you found it cool. And I hope that you go try some of these things. Those are just 5. There's a bunch more. There's lots of cool things for graphic designers. We didn't talk about vectors. We didn't talk about using smart objects more effectively. We didn't talk about the camera raw filter, even though you think that's for photographers. It's also great for graphic designers because you do it on a layer by layer basis. I could easily do 5 more, but we are out of time. So with that said, cheers everyone. Take care. Thanks for watching. Glad you learned something. And learned 2 things. Wow. After 20 years of Photoshop, I'm the same way. Every time I see someone else doing Photoshop, it's like, oh, I didn't know you could do it that way. Always doing that. So with that said, cheers everybody. Take care. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.